right, welcome everybody. Maybe we could actually start with our artist telling people where they are tonight, because we're not all in the same place. We'll start with you, Heather Mae.
My name's May Erickson, and I am tuning in from Western North Carolina in Dillsboro, which is about an hour west of Asheville, and I teach at Western Carolina University and run the ceramics program there.
And Anika?
Hi, I'm Anika Major. I'm joining from Seattle, Washington. I've been here for about 5 years now, working and teaching. And my studio is currently located at Rain City Clay, which is in Seattle proper area.
And Maya?
Hi, I'm Maya Vivas. I am tuning in from, I guess, a little bit outside of Portland, Maine. I'm at the Watershed Residency currently. Yeah.
And Dustin?
Hi, I'm Dustin Yager, and I am broadcasting from Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you all so much. And we're here tonight with some of the participating artists in our online invitational exhibition, Tender Queer, which was guest curated by Dustin Yager. Dustin's going to lead the conversation with us tonight. And the participating artists in full is Shea Burke, Aaron Caldwell, Mae Erickson, Anika Major, Lay, and Maya Vivas. That's all I have to present, and I'm going to hand things over to our guest curator, Dustin Yager, who's going to lead the conversation. And I'm looking forward to hearing what y'all have to say. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Regina. Well, I wanted to start just by saying thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. Thanks to the artists in the show, and thanks to the three of you for joining us tonight and sharing your time. Did I say thanks to the Clay Art Center? Regina and I actually both had COVID while we were pulling this together over the spring. So we've been through a lot together. I want to encourage the audience to pull up the exhibition page if you're not familiar with all of the works in the show. I'm not going to show a lot of images or screen share anything tonight, but you can also find bio information on all of the artists and background about them and their work in the online exhibition, as well as see examples of the work that's in the show. I'm always a little bit like extra alert or somehow suspicious of exhibitions when there's like a identity category as part of the focus or the framing. It can be very overwhelming for me without some other kind of thread to like think about or pull through a show like this. There are also plenty of queer makers who maybe don't display their identity directly in their work, and arguably there are works in this show that maybe do not explicitly connote the sexuality or the gender of the maker. Or maybe it's not present in all of their work all of their time. So just to frame, like, it's not a direct line in all cases between I'm queer and therefore this is the type of work that I make. So I wanted to add a thread of community engagement when I was choosing artists to invite to this show. And I also want to call in other filters of our multiple overlapping and intersecting identities and how they come into the work in the show. So maybe as much as being experts on our own identities, we also have to develop skills to communicate about those layers of how we sit in the world. Keeping in mind that communication and those overlapping public and private roles and these intersecting identities, I wonder if, Heather Mae, if we could start by talking a little bit about the Pride Pots project that you're in the middle of. And I think I remember you posting early versions of that work something like 2 years ago. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening with that project now and how it's developed to this state?
Yeah, thank you for that lovely introduction to explain kind of your thoughts on the exhibition. That's great to hear. So Pride Pots developed out of a project that I was trying to figure out for, like you said, about 2 years. So it developed into a project where it was going to be another collection of my work, but then it transitioned from that into a community engaged project. So I had made a whole bunch of designs like I normally do and try and figure out what the meaning or the narrative or the story behind the work is, to kind of develop a new collection or body of work. And I had made a ton of models and molds and was trying some new things and, you know, taking risks in the studio to make breakaway molds and interesting forms. And it was around, I think it was around like December of 20, when did COVID happen? Gosh, 2020, 2020 or 2019? 2020. Yeah. So it was kind of like the end of 2019 where I just kind of was maybe burnt out a little bit at work. I was really trying to figure out what was going on in my work, and what I wanted in my work for the future. I was up for tenure in March of 2020. So it was basically, you get tenure and here's COVID, you know, good luck. So there wasn't a huge celebration. But I, at the kind of the turn of the year, I started doing a lot of reading and self-care and professional development. I was reading a lot of Brene Brown, and I had found Hannah Gadsby. I don't know if you know her. She's a queer autistic comedian from Tasmania. And just from reading a lot of like all of Brene Brown's books, basically, I was like, oh my God, this woman is a researcher, an academic, and a storyteller. And I'm like, she's speaking to me. And this is the stuff that I need right now, not only in my work, but for my classroom. And so there's a lot of different threads that come together. So through that professional development, I started doing more professional development for my service to the institution, and curriculum development and design and stuff like that. And then the work started flowing into that as well. So when I was home on lockdown, I brought a ton of pots home. I have pictures in my living room of me painting pots and, you know, trying to figure out what it was going to come out of these, you know, how I was going to find the surface of these pots. And I don't know how it happened. I think it was around the time of the big Me Too and then Black Lives Matter and Breonna Taylor. And I just started like, oh my God, I need to do this. And I was like, oh God, this is scary, because I had never came out academically. And, you know, after tenure, I'm like, okay, I guess this is going to be okay. You know, and I live in the South. So I was, you know, and we've had some issues at our institution. So it's been a very difficult this past year for me, with all of my research and work and teaching all of those kinds of things and service for the Boyer model in education, to switch over to like embracing who I am as a person and realizing that I haven't been living in my own authenticity within the classroom and academia, and the things that I felt like were coming out in my work. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the stuff that my students need, that this place down south needs, that this university really needs. So it started to transition into figuring out, well, how can I get, all of a sudden I was kind of like, I'm having a conversation with myself here in my living room. That's, you know, that's what COVID was like for me. You know, I'm reading, I'm having a great time. I was podcasting, you know, Zooming with the students, but I was just like, this is a conversation that I've been having with myself for, you know, since high school, since, you know, before that. So it somehow transitioned into becoming a community project where I have my own small body of work that I'm working on within that some of the pieces are in the show. And I'm starting to kind of mass cast the work so that the community we can have community events. And I have 30 collaborators so far. And I'm hoping to have many, many, many more, because we just started doing hands-on events with the community in different locations.
And is that
conversations? Pardon?
People are coming in to decorate?
Yeah, so I have tomorrow, randomly, a friend of mine who's a dean of one of the colleges has a daughter, and we were just chatting on a leadership tour, And she was saying, oh, my daughter loves art. She doesn't fit in, all these other kinds of stuff. So, oh, we'll bring her into Pride Pot. So, so she's bringing her daughter to the studio tomorrow and we'll paint pots together. So I'm kind of posing it to the community as different kinds of events or happenings that, that can occur. And so it could be like a bunch of my friends' kids want to paint pots, or a family thing, or a work thing where, a business might want to come in and do some professional development and have some fun and, around, hard conversations, those kinds of things. So it's just starting to take off, and I'm starting to get my calendar more full. And so far I've gotten a grant from my college. I got a Catalyst grant for probably most of the materials for the project that I'll need. And then Speedball is going to sponsor the underglazes. We're testing them right now, so we're really excited about that partnership. And the final culmination exhibition will be at the end of next year at the Clay Studio in Philadelphia. So I'm really excited to bring kind of my work and my research, that whole Boyer model of teaching, research, professional practice, and scholarship and service up back to Philadelphia, where I was a resident in 2006, 7, 8, I believe. And the piece that you have that you've been using with the Ben Franklin piece, that piece is in remembrance of my time as a resident artist in Philadelphia. I wouldn't have been able to make that piece there, because it would have been too public, I think, and too visible about gay rights and, about gendered or, queer work.
You weren't ready.
I was not ready. Like, my friends knew, but academically that I, would never put a gay show on, nothing on my resume, because that was scary to me. It's still, like, let me tell you, I'm still scared.
we have so much to talk about. I think I'm curious about that public-private thing, which we might come back to at the end. And I'm curious about historical work and the role that history plays in the work of Anika and Maya and the other artists as well. Was there a moment with Pride Pots when you felt like it really flipped from being a collection of your cast work into the results aren't as important as the conversations that can happen?
Like that one moment when I decided that?
Was there a moment like that?
Oh gosh, it's been going on for a while, so it's really hard for me to really think back off the cuff when that moment was. Let me think about it, and I'll let you know later if I do think about when that moment was. That's a good question.
Well, and the other question I'm curious about is that how you frame it about difficult conversations. When I've done such open-ended projects like that, I found it really difficult to kind of direct that conversation. How do you frame that? Or I sometimes feel like it's not even possible to expect a certain conversation to develop.
Well, I think that it's about creating safe spaces and belonging. A student of mine, a graduate student, Jen Gordon, who just became the student director at large of NCECA, she's rented a skinny gallery shop space and has opened a small boutique that's basically an artist co-op run by her and the undergrads at the moment, and I'm like the faculty advisor. So we're downtown. They can come in and paint pots downtown. They can, so the events can happen anywhere, these happenings. And I think that the part about the conversation is creating safe spaces to, paint the work. And the work is like kind of on the periphery, but it's about meeting the community, and whatever happens in that space happens, and because we're, using the rainbow of colors, because we're, I've had many, many kids come in, and obviously the conversations with them are going to be much different, so, and it's interesting, like, I'm not really a public kind of person, like I'm not really that outgoing. So once I started to do these events, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing to myself? Like, but I'm like, I feel like I need to do this work. There's something in it where I need to build more community. And maybe it's a selfish thing where it's just like, I want to meet more people. I want to figure out how to connect people and create safe spaces. Like our first Pride in Silva, where I live here, was last September. So we're going to have our second Pride here, and Pride Pots is going to be there. I'm really excited about that. But we have a very supportive community here, I would say. Kind of half and half, you know, it's kind of like that.
Polarized.
Where a lot of the business owners downtown in our historic small downtown, a lot of them are LGBT. So it's really great to have the support of the other business owners, and find a way to get things like recruiting to happen that, you know, through this project also for my university, that's, you know, under the wire, but not all the way down, you know, at the university, because there's kind of a gap that we call the Catamount gap between the downtown and the university. It's very separate. So one of my goals is to bring the students downtown, to bring more community downtown, and to build that so that they have safe spaces. And my student said to me last year, if you didn't have a table for the school at Pride, we wouldn't have gone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, so things are happening slowly, I think, where not only am I feeling comfortable, but they're seeing that I'm feeling comfortable, and, you know, they're starting to come with me. They're starting to kind of open up more in the classroom and be, I think, really feel that they can truly be themselves. So I'm kind of excited for this project to work through some of the classes that I'm teaching at the university, and have the students, you know, involved more as assistants and as people to begin the conversations. You know, I don't really want it to be about me, you know, I want it to be about the community and this partnership.
Well, I want to talk to Maya too about the gallery space that you've been running. Congratulations, Heather, on all of that launching and coming to fruition and kind of weaving those own threads through your community. Maya and I were on a panel at NCCA in, I think, 2018. I was looking back through my files to see if I had a date. And I think a little bit after that, you and a collaborator launched Ori Gallery. Can you talk a little bit about what role that's playing in Portland now?
Wait, sorry, you cut off. Can you repeat that?
Oh, can you talk a little bit about the role that that's playing in Portland now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we met, it was just like an idea, and now it's like a thing that's been a thing for like many years now. I guess, what, 4 years? No, 18, 20, 21, 22, 4 years. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it really did start with my collaborator, Rue, being like, wouldn't it be funny if we just started a gallery? And it really came from the frustration of, you know, trying to be an artist and trying to get people to pay attention and like show my work and like engage the art world. And I feel like we just kept hitting lots of walls, and we're just being really frustrated by like never being invited to a seat at the table. And so we were like, we're just going to make our own table. And really wanted to create a space where like our identities, like when you walk into the space, it's like, yes, everyone is here as queer, and yes, everyone is a person of color. Like, what other conversations can we have? Because I know you mentioned being a little wary of exhibitions being framed around identity, and I think we were weary of like everything being framed around identity. And so we're like, okay, if we can go into space where identity is assumed, and we already know this about this, what other, like I said, what other conversations can we have? And since it's really grown, it's been kind of a pillar of like the queer, trans, POC art community in Portland. I'm really proud of it. I'm really amazed by how much of an anchor point it's been in that space. It's a really self-sustaining now. I have since last year officially kind of taken a little bit more of a step back from it. Through grants and funding and all these things, I was able to like hire a curator to do all the work that I was doing. And then I was a board member for a while, and now I'm kind of being like, you know, maybe my baby can like go live off on its own. It's been really it's been really beautiful to see. Once the pandemic hit, and we didn't feel comfortable having in-person exhibitions anymore, we channeled all of our funding into art and more of an artist residency model. There was like a shop in there and a gallery space. We took down the shop. The gallery space had movable walls. We moved things around and just turned the whole space into a studio. And so we invited artists in and gave them money, gave them space. A lot of artists lost their space of work. They lost jobs. And so we were like, if we can still provide community for community in this way, then we're doing our job. And it was really important for us to be able to pivot to meet the needs of artists during that time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so hard. And I was wondering if you had moved into online exhibitions and things. And
Oh, yeah.
glad that you were able to stay open in any way. I'm curious. The great hive mind of Instagram tells me that you have been traveling, and now you're at Watershed. Hello, Watershed.
Yeah.
How does it? Do you have any? I'm just curious on your reflections, and I know maybe it's a little bit new, as it looks like you've just landed there in the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
Reflections about going from that kind of cozy home base where identity is more known or assumed or not the elephant in the room, to the traveling and the residency space where you have to reestablish some of those things in a different way. So just kind of like a broad reflections on your travels.
I don't think I've slowed down enough to even reflect for myself. So that I feel like this question is a bit of a can of worms, because I'm like, what have I even done?
And you just have been making work for the first time in a little bit, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm touching clay for the first time since November of last year. So it's been a hot minute, and it's been like a kind of a janky, rusty start. But yeah, I was traveling. I went to Mexico, London, Berlin, Paris, where else? Madrid, Lisbon, and then back to London. And then now I'm here. So it's been a journey. I think my goal of the trip was to find other artists, find community. I have some family out there that I was trying to connect with for the first time. I think more than anything, I learned not so much about, well, I was going to say not so much about my art practice and more about myself and how I want to navigate the world, but I guess that all goes hand in hand. Just about my own agency, advocating for myself a little bit more, being more independent, enjoying the freedom, doing more risk taking. And I feel like all of that will most likely translate into the works that I will be making, this year.
Wow, we've reached.
Does that answer the question? I don't know if I answered.
I think that's really great. I think that it's so self-aware, and I don't know, I feel like I have some other notes about some of these things later on as I scroll through my little agenda here that comes up on that responsibility and communication, I suppose. Yeah, I want to come back and talk about your work in a hot second, but I wanted to talk to Anika about community threads through your practice. And I think that for me, the connection that I see is Anika allowing people to see themselves reflected in these beautiful and very like realistic illustrations that you're putting on your work. And I love how you talk about everyone being a heroine and everyone having the ability to create a narrative and a story for those people. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about that, if that's part of your thinking of that depiction and the community building, and then also move into a little bit talking about how you see the role of the body or of depiction and realism in your work.
Yeah, a lot of the work I was doing, like right at the beginning of working with clay, was just like exploring surface. And so I have this history in painting just realistic figures, and like didn't get to really explore a lot of that, just like pushing back and forth with material and technical things, until I stopped kind of thinking of them as like had be so like framing them so seriously in terms of like figurative with like the formal training that I had in school, and just thought of them more as like self-explorative and just like representing my own experiences and kind of the idealization of my femininity and that kind of character that I've built up in my head. And like the more that I shared of those things on my work and with other people, like the more of other people's experiences that I got to hear about and how they bonded with the characters that they saw, whether they like related to them like through characteristics or just like with the themes that I was working with. And like that all has been fueling all of the work that I've been doing so far, especially like recently, just trying to explore more and like represent as much experiences of other people and myself as I can through common threads.
And are those interactions primarily on social media? Are they at markets? Are they in your studio?
Mostly through social media. I am not much for markets right now. I'm such a slow maker. It takes me like quite a while to build up a large amount of work. And so I recently had a solo show where I had around 45 pieces, which is like the largest I've sent to a gallery yet. And like the amount of responses that I got through that was kind of amazing. And it made me like so happy to be able to hear other people's experiences. Just like finding connection with some of the characters that I have on my plots. So yeah, it's all just been like people reaching out, and it makes me so happy.
That's great. I've shown your work in my classes to people who are wanting to make depictions, I guess. And I think the layering of your colors and the use of the carving is really great. Maya, to come back to your work, I think when we talked in 2018, you were talking about lustered crystals and the little gems on your pieces as being representative of queer points or queer badges almost. I'm always so curious how your work references the body and also movement. I know you have a dance background. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about how you think about the body and movement in your sculpture?
Yeah, I feel like this has been coming up a bit in the residency here. And I think how do I want to say this? I think that dancing and sculpting are the same thing for me. I think that the sculpture that's made is kind of, or I'm slowly realizing, oh, it's thundering, can you hear it? I'm slowly realizing that, yeah, the sculpture, the end product is kind of like the artifact of the dance and the conversation that I'm having with the clay. And I think that I've replaced my like crystal gems with, within my most recent series, crystal gems with like these piercings that I have is more of like I'm dancing with these bodies, and these bodies also want to adorn themselves in a similar way that I want to adorn myself. And also I think that like, I feel like piercings have always been like kind of like a representation of alternative culture, you know what I mean? And like, and queerness for me, that I think has been really interesting. Like when I was starting to come out more and like reclaim my identity, like, and also maybe just to like rebel against my super religious mom, like getting piercings was like the first thing I did. I like got my nose pierced and like all these things, and of course she flipped out. But I think that like that has like piercings have like a really special place in my heart. So I guess that's why I started doing that instead of making these like very obviously pretty gold gems. Yeah. But I think I like that contrast. There always needs to be a point of contrast for me.
I love it. I wanted to talk about community tonight, and I wanted to talk about the body. And the third thing I was hoping we would have time to talk about would be to talk about history / the present day / technology. And Heather Mae provided us a lot of information about the piece that she mentioned about called Philadelphia Freedom, that features this portrait of Benjamin Franklin and his historical support for the queer lifestyle. Do you want to summarize that piece a little bit, Heather Mae? And is there the same kind of like historical research side to the Pride Pots project? I know you are somewhat research-based in your practice.
When I started, I got invited to do a Future Memories exhibition at the Clay Studio as a former resident, and that piece came out of that. So I started, gosh, it's so funny. I had the piece made when I was invited. I didn't have it surfaced, but I had it made. It was weird. So when the curator contacted me, I said, yes, I want to do the show. I randomly have the piece that I want to put in. I just haven't figured out the surface yet. I got to do a little bit of research. So if you look closely at the vases, kind of looks like one of the century vases. I didn't look at a century vase to make the piece. It all kind of happened in the back end, which is pretty bizarre for me to let that happen and flow. But once I started doing research and getting on the internet, I randomly had the decals from Ensika, from Sambal, and it just all kind of came together. It's weird. So the pots that one is from the same body of work, basically. I started making finding prototypes, basically, and figuring out like this simple, stupid way of putting them together. And it took me a couple of years to kind of get to where I am. Even, before that, I was kind of struggling with form and playing around. So if you go on my Instagram and you go, 2 years before Pride Pots, kind of, you'll see that I made a lot of forms that I never made molds of, and they're still in my studio because I just might go back, but I might not go back, and it just helped me to figure things out. But I started to take, a found creamer and then globbed clay on it and then put something else together. And I just started, I was like, oh, this is kind of simple, stupid. Like maybe I don't have to glue them together. Maybe clay can just bring them together. And then I had to figure out, well, how do I make these really complicated molds? Because I don't need a million, like one cast of that piece is fine for me. I don't need to make more of that. It's not interesting for me to do that. So it's a lot of work up front to get the one piece to work out. So I started to make the molds in sections, kind of like a body. And I love that you brought up the idea of the body, because I'm always thinking about the pot as a body. My background's in, traditional wheel thrown pots, and, all the body parts, of the pot, the neck, the rim, the belly, the waist, all those kinds of things that we know about. And I started to come up with this way of I'll use a term that I heard from Nikki Green about a piece that she put into a show that I curated here at Western, called Contemporary Clay, where she was Frankensteining parts together. I kind of felt like I was doing, hearing that from her, I was like, oh, that's kind of what I'm doing. And then I'm starting to chip away at the mold to break it apart, to unearth this model and rebirth this new body. And it kind of, when I see the stacked molds or the stacked pieces, it started to remind me of a book of the books that we had when we were kids, where you would put the elephant head and then the giraffe body and the alligator feet, and I was like, oh, I can put any of these pieces together and make a different form. So a lot of the pots don't even have bottoms. I'm putting fake bottoms on and flipping them and kind of mashing them together to make new forms out of these things that a lot of them were found in this area or bought at secondhand stores. And they, a lot of people who aren't even in ceramics will look at the thing and say, oh my God, that looks like a Jello mold. And I'm like, that's exactly what that is, but what are all these other things, so we can kind of play with that idea of the pot as a body and identity in that way. And the surfaces for the pots that I'm doing, I'm starting to play with where it's fancy and where it's not fancy kind of thing, where it's decorated and where it's not decorated.
And was
taking pots, open them up to see the inside of the pots. That one pot that you have splayed open, that's just a very traditional vase. form that I found, and I opened the mold this way and cast it so that you see it splayed open and you see the inside before you even turn it over and see the outside of the vase that becomes a bowl.
And for the decoration, has Benjamin Franklin always been a queer icon in your mind?
No, not at all.
Or was that
No.
a
But when I
happy
started researching
accidental
it,
discovery?
okay, so when I started researching it, I was like, oh man, I really love that song, Philadelphia Freedom. And I started looking up, I'm from New Jersey. So Philadelphia is like home. That's like my childhood home, kind of like, and I went to undergrad there and I spent many years teaching there as well. So when I say home, I'm usually thinking Philadelphia because I still have a lot of family around there. But I just started researching and finding images of what it was like being in undergrad, the places that I went, what it was like in the neighborhood, what it was like when I went back after grad school and after my Fulbright in Finland, what life was like in the queer community at that time, because I was in a different place. And, so just thinking about the stages of my life and just looking up anything that I remembered about Philadelphia around the year of 2006, because that's when I was at the residency. And I found the information about Ben Franklin and the tercentennial, which is the 300-year birthday of Ben Franklin, happened in 2006. So all this just kind of came together and I was like, oh my God, this decal has all this cool stuff on it that kind of has kind of two meanings to it. And it just kind of came together. It's weird.
Such a rabbit hole.
Yes, that research was. It totally was. It's kind of neat. Yeah, it's kind of neat that way. And it, random that one random decal that I was like, oh, this is a cool decal, but who's ever going to use a decal of the Ben Franklin bill, on certain, I've never seen anybody use that decal, but I bought it because it was just such a pretty decal. And I was like, I don't know if I'll ever use it. But then it just came up and I was like, and it looks so ghostly on there. Yeah. You're there, so you can pick the piece up and you can see the decal on the bottom of the pot too, which I don't think I don't know if I gave you that photograph of the stuff that's on the inside of the pots and what's on the bottom of the pot, which is kind of cool as well. Like a little tree.
Yeah, I don't think I saw that. That's really incredible.
You have to investigate the pot when you see it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you don't have the pots. That's why you can't investigate. Sorry.
Oh no, right.
That's online. I'll send you pictures. That's too funny.
Thank you. Anika and Maya, I wanted to just get your reflections on the role of history in your work, if any, because Heather May sent this information about this particular piece. And Anika, you mentioned your more classical training in portraiture. Do you want to talk more about that? And I'm so curious about your focus on the cowgirl too.
Yeah, so I mean, classical training, very loose term of just like, here's the rules of how to paint figures and here's how the body really and actually looks. But I think all of that I sort of just picked and pieced what I was interested in and threw the rest out the window in terms of like painting figures now when I do on the pots, because I think I'm more after like the feeling of the person and like the expressiveness and kind of conveying that through their queerness rather than anatomically correct like bodies at this point. Like I think I've just said it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of that has made it feel more fun and easy to represent my identity and like the people that I like love and care about and their identities. And the cowgirls and like cow babes that I've been painting lately have just been like a long time love that I've been way too scared to touch on. And I think that was just like a little hidden part of myself that like growing up in Texas, like it was very weird growing up queer and like not really coming to terms with that until like leaving that space and then coming into like a newfound love for it. So it feels like an acceptance of like child me and the like longing looks and the like love that I had for that kind of like flamboyance in characters of like just cowboy culture. And so like it just feels like a little love letter to past me and those investigations into like those kinds of characters.
That's wonderful, like personal history actually coming in a big way too.
Yeah.
I grew up in Wyoming. which is also not very queer, but there are a lot of cowboys and wranglers.
Mhm.
It's very different to go back as an adult now and see that
Yeah.
through a different lens. Maya, do you have historical reflections you want to share? Maya?
Yeah, sorry, my connection is a little funky.
Okay.
So you're frozen. Sorry. I think maybe just give it a second.
Okay, I think we're caught up.
Hello.
Yeah, I'll say what Regina just typed as well. If anyone else is thinking of questions they have for the artists, you can go ahead and put those into the chat, and Regina will
Hello. Oh,
sort them
I
out.
hear you now. Oh no.
Maya, are you there?
Yes. Okay, I hear you now.
Okay,
Cool.
go for
Okay.
you, and then we'll have some audience questions.
Wait, can you repeat that?
Well, go for you if you have any historical context you want to add to your work or how you think about your work, and then
Yeah.
we'll turn things back to the audience for a minute.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe I do. I don't know if I have historical context. I feel like I have future context. I think a lot of my sculptures are me through kind of like a speculative fiction lens, like trying to reimagine like future queer bodies. Yeah, I think that's what I'll say about it. It's like what if we as queer people keep doing what we've always been doing, as in like creating chosen families and changing our bodies to suit our own ways of expressing ourselves in our truest form. So it's kind of me imagining what if we kept doing that for millennia. And so I'm engaging with future queer bodies. Yeah.
Incredible. Ask me again in 800 years. We'll come
Yeah,
back.
ask me again in 800 years.
Thank you all so much. If you have questions you want to pose, or audience, if you have questions, how does my chat work? I'll go with this question. What is your relationship to clay as a conduit for your voice? Is this kind of a why clay? Does clay help you to say things that you are uncomfortable speaking about, writing about?
I think it's just so physical. It's so like immediate. And I think maybe as like a person who does dance, that's why it connects in that way. It's like an expression with body, and it's always doing it all the time, and I don't have to be there for it to dance. Like I can make it and it's always dancing.
I love that response. I have a background as a dancer as well. For 20 years I danced. So in undergrad and grad school, I wrote a lot about and researched about movement in the body and those ideas. So I love hearing that from you, Maya. My thing is clay is, the material that I know, and it's like so part of me now that I don't even think about it anymore. And if I didn't have it, I don't know what I would do, and it's just such a great material that always is surprising me, where it's like making something from nothing. It's like with your hand, like you don't even need really tools to do it. It's just so primal. And I love that I can make objects that are functional in different ways, that can function as, sculpture or pieces of artwork that are designed or are craft and have many different kind of layers of meanings and conversations with them.
Anika, I think your last answer was so right on that. Do you want to expand any?
I feel like I'm going to answer the original question, I think, first, while my brain is thinking about it. But like the hands-onness of clay, like just sort of fills all the gaps for me creatively. Like, and like I think just without clay, like painting by itself just doesn't feel like it's enough. So having multiple media to be able to kind of like flex my voice feels really like the only way to do it.
We've heard from you all about how clay has helped bridge these gaps. Are there other projects that you've done with clay or in a, you know, an art therapy kind of mode that have helped you to connect with people around you too?
Well, I've been teaching a lot for the last several years, and like just getting to explore the same things like again and again with students who are just experiencing it for the first time, like that in itself kind of feels therapeutic to me. And like getting to like watch them discover the medium, like, and discover like the same technique that I know through their eyes, like really it feels so special.
Yeah, I would say teaching in academia, I mean, and I've taught in art centers and places all over, workshops and stuff like that, but teaching was another thing I think that that I couldn't live without, you know, the clay and the teaching. Like I wanted to be a teacher before I even wanted to do art. I wanted to teach dance actually, and go to the same undergrad I went to, because a girl who was older than me had gone from my dance center. But teaching really pushes me to keep educating, to keep growing, to keep questioning, and the students really keep me on my toes, you know, so that I kind of have to do that. And I think that within my work and research in the last 20 years, I've just like trying to find ways to dovetail them all together so that they're even tighter bound, that I can't do one without the other, because just like Maya was saying, it's just like, you know, it's so much what we have to do, you know, to survive, to make the work, to market the work, to sell the work, to be your own manager, to teach, to, you know, all these kinds of things that we need to do. So I'm kind of excited that at the moment, all of my work is really, you know, my professional development, my leadership training, my service to the institution, my service to the community, like all of it is tied together, and I get to kind of talk about all of them all at the same time. And it feels like I get to be my whole self, which I don't think I've ever felt that before. It's always been so segmented, and this goes here and this goes here, and, you know, and thinking about that, my school, Western Carolina University, is a Carnegie engaged institution. And when I got here, I just felt that that need to get out into the community and to really learn who the people are and to learn about the land. We're on Cherokee land here. We just got our land acknowledgement, and we work with the people from the tribe all the time. So it's really great to know about who the community is, and not just be a professor at a university that isn't engaged with the region. And we are a regional comprehensive institution, a lot of first generation students. So that touches me a lot of veterans, a lot of queer students. They just are starting to come out of the woodwork, like everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, all my students, it's just like they're on that spectrum. It's crazy. So I feel like I'm at a really great place right now within my work and my research, and that I'm pushing things, and with the social engaged work and the community engagement, it's just developing as the days go on. I don't want to like pigeon look like or how it's going to develop. It's just like one day at a time. You know, it's just going to develop into whatever happens at the clay studio at the end of next year. So I'm kind of excited to see how the community responds.
I am excited about the show, and I was writing questions for this panel and looking at Aaron Caldwell's bio and recent work, and he's going on to teach at a middle school in Baltimore, I think, next year. And I think it's so cool to have people here teaching at a college level and at a secondary level and at a community level. And I think part of that is maybe just you know, the teaching and being a professional gay, but also the visibility that we all have, you all have in different ways in communities through formal roles, but also through exhibitions and through the depictions and the other ways that you put yourself out there. There's a question about discrimination in professional settings, about how you might have encountered or navigated that in the ceramics field. Have you found it to be more or less welcoming than other places in your life? And maybe even we can each talk about over the last even 5 years, how the reception might have changed. Does anyone feel like taking the lead on that?
I'll say that within the ceramics field, I don't feel I've ever had any issues, but I never try to talk about it or do work about it. So I think now felt like that I needed to do it, that it, like in my career where I was, the things that were happening, I just needed to do it. But like I said, I'm still scared in academia, working for the North Carolina school system, you know what I mean? But within the ceramics field, I can't remember any issues that I've ever encountered.
I mean, I think, oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think in any space, especially when you start navigating the art world, you get, I mean, at least I get like the, I was about to say the run-of-the-mill normal amount of racism. So I think before I get any kind of response of being queer, like people aren't going to clock that I'm queer right away, but they'll clock that I'm not white right away. You know what I mean? So I think that those are the things that I'm navigating before I'm navigating how people react to my queerness. I guess a lot with my like peers and like in my ceramics community, like I've never really experienced anything like that. It's mostly like when I'm trying to navigate institutions or people who hold power in like the gatekeepy kind of ways, and like trying to make sure I'm getting paid, like pushing for those honorariums, all those things. I think that it's like when I start to encounter those things. But I feel like none of that is specific to the field of ceramics. I feel like all of that is specific in general and how the world perceives me. So I feel like it's sad, but I'm used to it.
I feel like maybe, I mean, a lot of the things that I've experienced in the ceramics community has been like welcoming also, but a lot of the like discrimination or like concerns of discrimination in professional settings has mostly been like not being taken seriously. Like I think in the last several years, especially where I've been more openly, outwardly queer in the ways that I dress or speak, or like the things that are brought into conversation, it's been a lot of like dismissive, like, you know, language, or just like not taking what I have to say at face value. And I think standing up for myself and like the people in my community, like being able to do that has been a challenge. And like, that is something that I'm ultimately like aiming to get better at. Is just being able to stand up and like actively like say I'm present and we're here, and like we're not trying to gloss over that.
we've always been here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those experiences. I think that's an important part of what we're doing as well. Come back to the ask me in 800 years, Maya, right? Of like,
Yeah.
is discrimination done? We'll see in the future.
Yeah.
There's been times tonight and as I was thinking about questions to ask, where I have thought about Heather May's the splayed open vase, right? And how that's such a great metaphor for taking the most internal identity-based things about ourselves and trying to find a way to navigate that public and private boundary, right, of putting them out there. So thank you for this conversation this last hour. And I think we can leave it there.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was a really wonderful, invigorating conversation. I'd just like to thank you, Dustin, for all your hard work and partnership with Clay Arts Centre on the Tender Queer exhibition. It's been wonderful to work with you, and thank you to our panelists, not only for their time tonight, but for allowing Clay Arts Centre to be a part of your visibility journey. We really appreciate that, and we're very, very proud to have you exhibit with us online. Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. I think we can leave it on a good note.
Hi, good to meet y'all. Thank you.